for or afford the person? What does it offer? And so you've put up a whole lot of things about what we consider, as well as what the positions affords us. So some of the considerations, I think there's some a lot of commonality with what you've identified as the sorts of things. So the expressed preference of the student, and there's a whole lot of stuff around, the student-centric issues around their preferences, what they would find comfortable, what they would find familiar, what they would find not distracting, what they would find acceptable in a way. So that, they're kind of student-related factors, aren't they? What they can actually physically do. If somebody has been sitting in a wheelchair for the last 20 years, chances are they can't lie on their stomach because they're so flexed. If they've been chair-bound for a long time, lying on their stomach is not going to be a nice option. So there's all those kind of, if I clump them together, all those student-related factors. And there'll be physical factors, emotional factors, cognitive factors, etc. So, and in there obviously is their personal history and the gender and all that sort of stuff, all around safety, modesty, that sort of stuff. So we'll put that up as sort of student-related factors. I'm just going to put it on this board. And then where there's an intersection, so someone's written here, is it a practitioner decision or a client decision? That's a really interesting question, because if you say to a student, lie down any way you like, so you just actually don't make a decision and you let them make the decision, what would happen? I mean, I'm not saying I've done it. What are the pros and cons of that? Have we got the box? Jane, you want to say something? Jane just was... If you've forgotten, it's fine. It's just... So if I said to you, okay, we've had our little interview chat about the FI, and I said, lie down, whatever position you like.
Well, the pro of it would be that they would go to where they're comfortable and you'd get an idea of what they can do. Anyone want to do a con?
It's not a con, it's would they, you said they'd go and lie down in whatever way they were comfortable. I wonder whether somebody might lie down in a way they're expected to lie. In other words, they lie on their back even though actually it's really uncomfortable for them. Or,
Yep.
I don't know. Yep. I'm just wondering whether that's a possibility.
Why might I choose to give that decision-making over to the person? Why might I do that very consciously let them choose?
Well, you might be very interested to see what they did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And? And? Yes, break the ice. Yeah. It gives them control. So if I'm picking up that somebody is very anxious and very controlling, and they're really, they're worried about being vulnerable, in other words, I can actually give over a lot of power initially with that gesture of saying, look, you choose the position that you're the most comfortable in. And then immediately they think, oh, I've got some power in this situation. So I might choose to do it for that reason, because safety and control, which are often related, might be the absolute tipping point that I've picked up in the interview. Or maybe it's the other way around, is that they are so passive that they've just come, I can think maybe a scenario where someone has said, someone's husband, the wife has said to the husband, sent the husband along, and he's just like, oh yeah, whatever, just do what you like. And you actually want them to engage because they're just passive and they think it's a massage and they just have to lie there like a log and just have it done unto them. So actually, well, no, it's not like that. This is this is an active process. So the first thing you get them to do is make a decision about. So you could do it for those sorts of patient, client related, student related decisions about getting them to engage or not engage, as the case may be. Yeah, and you're right. If it's the way you phrase it, choose any position that you like is different to choose the position that you find most comfortable. Or often what I'll say is, well, when it doesn't, when none of these factors bother me, because I'll just work. I'm going to do the one step at a time kind of lesson. Is I'll actually say, well, lie in the position that you go to sleep in. Problem solved. No decision to make. They made it. Get it out of the way, because if it's not a deal breaker question in the context of the lesson, if I've already seen that I can access whatever I need to access, that maybe is the only factor. Could you imagine that scenario? Yeah. And then of course you have to be comfortable with the outcome of that, is that they could lie in any position. So you have to have a certain. So I'm not suggesting that necessarily you do that, but you could think about it. Okay. All right, so there's student-related factors around all of that, in that holistic sense of their thinking, their sensing, their feeling. And then there's the really pragmatic factors which some of you have got in about well, the pain and discomfort stuff is related to the student, their personal history. Accessibility. So there's the pragmatic reasons about why you might choose a particular position. So this is getting to the affordances, like what does a position offer you? So if we just drag a table over here, and let's go through some of the or did you do something funny? Did I miss it? Oh. I had to be there? Okay. Position, that's an S. Okay, so what's a position? On your back. Okay. Julie, could you just come and lie on your back, please? So let's think about the pros and cons of this position. So how does this make you feel, Julie, lying on your back like this? Yep. Does everybody feel really comfortable lying on their back? Sometimes?
Depending on what support you provide in addition to life.
Yeah, so you could vary that. So Julie does look actually very comfortable, but you might think her head could be up a little bit higher, and that might, so people might feel, who doesn't like lying on their back? Are you a bunch of freaks? Kevin doesn't, why don't you like lying on your back? Lower back pain? Yeah. So for some people, lying straight on, and me included, if you ask me to lie flat on my back, my lower back feels really uncomfortable for about a good 10 minutes. So there is a discomfort thing, which ultimately it's really good for me. It's good for me to have that pain, but it takes a while for my hip flexors to let go. So I'm quite arched. That's the thing that I have in my lower back. So, and then we do, this from ATM. So if somebody has that, then the variation would be to take the strain off their hip flexors, because that's pulling their back into an arch like that. And that flattens their back, and it just gradually lets their hip flexors let go so that their lower back can come flat to the table, and then you can gradually do it down. So there is a mechanical reason why lying flat on your back is hard for some people, depending on the tonus particularly in the hip flexors, but it could also be, if they've got a lot of activity in their tummy, and their chest is like that, then their head will be tipped back. Can you imagine that? So that's not nice for people either. So that and their chin's up. I mean, Julie does look very comfortable lying on her back. What about from a... Okay, yeah. So what about from a feeling point of view, like from an emotional point of view? Julie, how do you, if you don't mind me asking, you can say, I don't want to tell you. Yeah. So for some people, lying on your back can feel a bit exposed. Other people, it doesn't matter at all. So there is no right answer here. It's about, if you don't, and you don't know that, you can just quietly say, if you think, okay, I'm thinking around, I'd like to work with you on your back. Are you okay lying on your back? And they'll just go, because they're good, good person, they'll go, oh, yes, I'm fine. And then they'll lie on their back, and you notice that their breathing really changes quickly because they feel vulnerable, maybe. So you ask them, you okay on your back like that? And they'll go, yes, I'm fine. Or they'll go, yeah, I'm fine. So this is where it's an iterative thing. You make a decision, but it's getting to your point. You're not wedded to it. And if you notice this is not, the decision's not going to work, just say, okay, well, you can try a modification, mechanically bring their knees up, put something under their head, or you can just say, no, this is really not, they really look anxious, onto the side or something like that. Now, mechanically, what does lying on your back, why would we choose it? What's it good for?
You get good access to
Access.
Access to feet, access to the pushing into the hips.
the hips, so much.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, you get great access, particularly to the flexors of the hips, and you get good access to the tummy, so the front of the torso and the feet, as you say, and it's an orientation it's a social kind of orientation in that sense. You can see them, you can see their face and so forth. So, and you can really access, so if we put lying on the back, you can really access flexion really easily. What other planes of action can you access? Rotation? Sort of up to a point, because you can rotate them. And interestingly, when you're on your back, it's called supine. Rotation is anti-gravity, which is unusual because rotations normally, most of our rotations are in the horizontal. It's not against gravity, it's sort of relatively neutral to gravity, whereas the rotation in supine is anti-gravity. So it's different, but it's there. What else? What other plane of action is really accessible? This is revision. Sorry?
Push on a foot or a leg, is that transmission?
Yeah, transmission. Yep. So that kind of transmission stuff is really accessible. And the other plane is the plane of the table now, which is that the way things moving away from each other. So taking the arm out and the leg out and all that sort of stuff. So the limbs are really accessible, aren't they? So I'm probably mixing up a few things here.
So, adduction?
Yeah, abduction.
Abduction.
Yep. So everything's very, limbs, the front of the torso and the head, really accessible. And they're accessible in all of these planes, pretty much. Yeah. Yeah. But it does have this safety issue, and it does have the comfort issue that you need to think about for people whose flexors can't let go quickly, that you need to attend to. Is that kind of clear? But a lot of people sleep on their backs, so you can ask that. Are you comfortable sleeping on your back? I don't like sleeping on my back because my sinuses are so cloggy. It's horrible now. So I've changed over the years. I used to sleep on my back and I wouldn't in a pink fit now. And then you can make, we've said that rotation is against gravity, but it's not. As soon as you vary the position and have the knees up, then of course the rotation of the legs is into gravity. So you can manipulate all those things. That's quite nice, and you can use the limbs as handles to really access a lot of areas throughout the whole length of the trunk. So it is a really accessible position. The other thing that affords is great stability. So it's very stable. Yep. 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 Pelvis is quite accessible. Yep. So when I say torso, that's chest and pelvis. Oh, abdomen, whatever you want to put in there. Julie, are you happy to lie on your stomach? Okay, lie on your stomach, Julie. So what I'm doing, Julie's telling us what her experience is, which you can contrast with your own, and then you can start asking other people, because everybody's very different about what you like. So how do you like lying on your stomach, Julie? Okay, so why is that? What? Yep.
It feels squashed.
Head feels squashed, so like it doesn't know where to go. Yep. So whose preference is to lie on their stomach? Why do you like it?
Because since we had Julie's lesson, remember how to make yourself more comfortable. Sorry. Since we had Julie's lesson of making ourselves more comfortable on my stomach, I actually now sleep a bit on my stomach because I can make myself more comfortable and give my face more room, but it's not a traditional flat on your stomach posture.
Yeah. So this is a really common, Julie's reaction is common, that feels jammed up, particularly in the neck, because gravity is making you flat, but you have to get your snout clear, which is what little Bub's learning to do, getting her snout clear. So having to lift her head and rotate so that she can breathe. And we don't like that necessarily, because look at what I have to do if I'm like that, and to get my snout clear so I can breathe. I've got almost, all of the rotation is happening in my neck. And that's tricky. So what I presume, I don't know Julie's lesson, maybe I do, but maybe I don't, is if you really decide this is a position you want to work in for reasons that we'll go into later, you can put something under here to pop your arm down. That's it. Like a bolster or a pillow or something like that, so that then I'm distributing the rotation down into the chest. So that all of the rotation is not happening in the neck. So you can know that a constraint of this position is that it can make people feel very necky and clogged, whatever, and you can ameliorate that by distributing the rotation. So by knowing what the cons are in the position, but you can mitigate them up to a point. But some people really don't like it. If people got quite tight hip flexors, they don't like this either, because actually it's stretching them. Maybe they love it. Maybe you want it. That's what you want. It depends on how much you want to challenge people. And that was one of the considerations you had on the other side of the board, is how much do you actually want to challenge somebody? We're working with comfort all the time, but maybe it's actually going to be really good to actually have them in a challenging position, and they find comfort in a challenging position. That can be really profound because it's opening up a door for them. What other qualities about this position? So what does it afford us? What opportunities does it open up for us?
Feet again.
Extension, yeah. So there's you can't flex because it's into the table unless you do some rotation, but it really offers us great access to the extensors and the whole spine. That was, in a word, exposed. In a word, one of the patient could be that people feel a bit suffocated. But some people feel like comforting, like this is safe. So this is a safety position for some people. Yep. Yeah, in the same way that you can get rotation on the front. Yeah. Yep. So it's the same kind of thing. Is if I want to get rotation, so actually I've already showed you how I can get rotation here. If I lift up here, let your elbow drop. That's it. So that's rotation of the, sorry? And I can get rotation here. I can use the leg as a lever and I can get rotation here as well. And then I could draw her leg up and then I've got rotation in the trunk as well. And then she's actually stable as well. So I can get rotation. In the trunk, it's rotation against gravity as well. But then it's that falling into, so I can do that. And I can get rotation in the limbs, like that. So the limbs are still really quite accessible, but more in a extensor backward kind of way. I can still get that movement, the limbs going away from the body. I can still get the abductions kind of stuff. Still access the limbs, etc. The head is a little bit trickier because of this requirement to breathe. When do we teach the lesson of teaching people how to not breathe? Yeah, that's right. So, and in these two positions, it can also access diagonals as well. What's another position? On the side? Julie, would you like to lie on your side? Okay, how do you feel about this position, Julie? So what did she automatically do to find comfort?
Support her head.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, she bent her knees and she put something under her head. Could you lift your head up, please? So we've done all of this before, but why would we do that? So now the other thing that I didn't say about on your back is this is super stable. So if this is stable, that is super stable. Lying on your front is super stable. If we look at side lying, what it affords us is it's actually quite unstable. But Julie did the sensible thing to make it stable by bending her knees up. Whereas if she was like that, then she has to really, and if I did this, yes, I will. Unless I do that. So she's really unstable now. So I can, the variations in here going from very unstable to more stable is a good thing. But it's interesting, some clients will come in and lie like that with their legs long in line with their body. Yeah, yeah. And you have to say to them, can you just bend your knees and hips up? Have you seen it? Who's seen it in ATMs? Like, people are really funny. Really funny. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've got our work cut out for us. There are people out there who seriously need us. It's gobsmacking how little people listen and how they're so used to the habitual is not the most sensible. It's really interesting. It's fascinating. Endlessly fascinating. Which is why it's good for you to work with the real public, not with you guys, because you are too sensible. So why would I choose Sideline? What does it offer me? What can I...
If you had a very big, say, a big person that was not very easy to move, putting them on the side like this, you've got a nice handle with the shoulder and hips and they're a bit more unstable, you can get them moving.
Yeah. And why? Because rotation is really accessible. So you can really easily get people access rotation in people in Sideline because they're essentially unstable. So it's great for rotation.
Pregnant women
Yep.
necessarily not encouraged with people in the later stage.
Yep. So pregnant women who shouldn't be lying on their tummies and who can't lie on their tummies and shouldn't be lying on their back. I'll just repeat for the tape. Yeah, and people for reasons where there are some maybe emotional elements or the suffocating elements to lying or the physical constraints about lying on their back or their front. So the side is really... So hands up who goes to sleep on their side. So it's actually the most common... If you say to somebody, lie on the table, the position that you most like to sleep in, I would say that looking at there was about 70% of people would say, yeah, I go sleep on my side. So it's very familiar. And there's lots of ways of varying it. So you can access rotation, definitely, but you can access flexion and you can access extension. So it's one where you can access both easily. And the plane of the abduction stuff, yeah, you can access it. It's against gravity, but it's okay. But the big ticket item is rotation. The big ticket item here is extension. The big ticket item here is rotation. The big ticket item here is flexion. And the other sort of aspect of being on your side, of course, is you access the side, that side. What's interesting, though, and maybe we've talked about this a lot when we're demonstrating FI, is just scoot forward a little bit. This is where it's really cunning, is I can be rotating Julie like this, and she thinks it's all about this shoulder because my hands are on this shoulder. But what's happening on her underneath shoulder? I'm rotating the proximal over the distal. So I'm rotating her trunk over her right arm, and the movement is actually happening in her right shoulder. And the same thing I can do in her right hip. I get my rights and lefts mixed up. Right hip, right shoulder. Like I'm actually moving her in her right shoulder and her right hip. Now there is movement also in here as well, but she doesn't know that I'm having a fantastic crack at her right shoulder, and she doesn't know it. Yeah, she does because she's smart. But sometimes they say, "Oh, can I lie on the other side so you can do the other side?" And I go, "Oh, yeah, I've already done that. Sorry," because you have. And then you can access the trunk in terms of side, but you can also access front and back. Of course, you can access underneath as well, but that's okay. All right. So in summary, so that the sort of... Would anybody find this position unsafe? Yes, if they feel unstable. Would they feel vulnerable in this position? Maybe not. Yes, as long as you don't roll them backwards. so that they know that there's plenty of table, and that's why we've got wide tables. But if you are working on a little skinny massage table, this is not nice for people to lie sideline. Yep. Yes, that's a good point. So so some people have got quite bony knees, so having a little bit of something in here and maybe bony ankles is nice, like a towel or something. Unfortunately, it's probably a bit too habitual, is I just got a blanket that I put there. Or if you want people to be really more unstable, you can put a roller there. And of course, there's all the lessons with that. If you had the roller business, you know, all the different ways you can use rollers to create instability and then take them away and have stability and stuff. So that's possible there as well. All right, so that's essentially side lie. So that's what it's kind of good for. What's another position? Sitting. Would you like to sit up? What's sitting good for?
The person can't lie or lie very easily or get up and down from the
Yep.
table.
Yep. Yep.
No.
Yep. So, I mean, the big thing is that, how do you feel in sitting? Pardon? Fine. Oh, yeah. So that could be a bit vulnerable if someone's feet aren't on the ground. Do you have an emotional attachment to sitting or not?
I feel like I'm going to be asked to do something.
It's more active.
It's more active. Yeah. So she feels more ready for action because it is more functional. And that can be a good thing and it can be a bad thing. Now, you guys, I know if we try and give you a sitting FI, chances are most of you will groan. Why? Oh, not a sitting lesson. Because of that. Because you know you're going to have to do more. You have to work harder because you're upright against gravity. So it is much more, yes, you can access all these areas. You've got a lot more degrees of freedom, and which means you have to be more active. So these can be very passive, like the table is supporting your weight, more or less. But here it is even more unstable. You've got an even smaller base of support than side lying. So immediately Julie's response is, I'm going to have to do something now. I have to engage. It's a social position. Lying down is not a social position, depending on your profession. Just saying. Anyway, just saying. It's not, by and large. So this is a transactional position. This is where demands are going to be made and met and so forth. So for someone who's very nervous about lying down and maybe needs to be in control, maybe this is fine. But that comes at a cost because she is engaging with gravity. Her ability to sense, what we get from the feedback from the table, what we get when we really let the table take our weight, is now that's not going to happen. Yes, more inclined to talk. Yes, that's right. It's a social. We're going to interact more. Now, some people would still do that lying down. What we haven't said is, if you really want someone to shut up, put them on their stomach. Really?
I agree.
Yeah, end of day lesson. I've got nothing much left in the tank. I don't want to talk to you on your tummy. This is sometimes your decision making is about your own energy. It's true.
I'm going to put a tape on now.
Sorry?
I'm
putting a tape on. Yeah.
I'll be back in a minute.
Sorry? Put the tapes on. Yeah.
The ATM on.
Yeah. Yeah, why not? Yeah, that's right. It's, that's that fantastic interface with, especially when you want to see how somebody moves themselves and you want them to engage, So I think we have got very much into that, I don't think your generation, but certainly, if I think back to my generation, Ruth, Jenny, FIs were silent, like sacred spaces. And it was this very atmospheric, very magical. And that's fantastic. Like, that's great to do too. But sometimes it is actually, you want the person to engage. You don't want them to be a passive and that for them to get up and have a, So you've got to think about that, that kind of valence, that the emotional content of the lesson. And, this is not going to induce that Feldy moment necessarily, but very potent lessons. Very potent lessons, because it's linking, because she's already up and ready to do, the lesson is much more likely to be doing. Does that make sense? And some of the, I've been working with some FIs from Gabby Yaron in her series that she did, and they're technically quite tricky, sitting lessons in a way, because there is so many, you can access everything so much, and there's so many degrees of freedom to move, because you haven't got the constraint of the table for the whole torso, and that's technically quite challenging. So, it's not something necessarily that you would dive straight into. Yeah, sorry. You expect me to read my writing. That's active, and that one's degrees of freedom. So I think we've talked about this idea of degrees of freedom is how much range can you access? Well, actually, technically, it's how many planes of action you can access. 1, 2, or 3 planes. Okay, so that's why you might choose sitting.
Susan, sorry, can I just ask a question?
Yes.
Sitting is something that people do a lot of, and often we put people on their backs to try and let them release the anti-gravity muscles.
Yeah.
So you've got extra work to do if somebody's sitting up, in terms of letting them kind of, either in terms of feeling themselves or being able to let that sort of stuff go.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah. It is, you've got a lot more work to do, I think. And the trade-off is, we all have to work harder in a way. The trade-off is that it might translate into function easier, because you're actually learning in situ, totally in context. You're learning how to sit better in sitting, as opposed to, okay, yeah. So it's always this trade-off, and it's why there's no right or wrong answer about this. And it's why you can hedge your bets, and you can work in, and we do, we work, it's not like we choose one position and you've only got one position. That's not true. You can have 3. You can have 10. You can do whatever you like. In fact, the more orientations the person learns the same thing, arguably the better. And the closer and closer those orientations get to real life function, the better and better. Yeah. But you might not be able to do that all in one lesson. Okay, so this is this lesson. And of course, all of the flexion, extension, rotations, everything is accessible. That's what I mean by the degrees of freedom is available. And it's familiar, which is a good thing and a not so good thing. What's another position that you would like? Over the table. Yeah. Would you mind? You can use the pads. Yep, and then, yep. So why did Julie choose to do it like this? It speaks to that fundamental issue with this.
Goes to kneel on the other side so that her face is facing towards, not her bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah, very vulnerable.
Very vulnerable. Yeah. So when I said, we'll be going through a sort of a over-the-table template FI, and I said, probably isn't something you do on first meeting. It's because of this vulnerability. And Julie's just illustrated that immediately. If you know them, it's fine, and you've got that rapport. It's not like so it's not like a never do an over the table lesson in your first appointment. You might make the call that actually, on balance, that patient safety, patient comfort thing, I can manage it because I know this person or whatever. There might be some other thing that mitigates against that factor that means it's not an issue, but it is an issue. What is good about this position? This is a hard question because you've only been in it a short time this morning, but what was your sense already this morning? What might it be good? Why might we choose it? Oh, fantastic! I'll replay it for Anna said, fantastic access to the sit bones and the pelvis. Yep, it is there. So in that vulnerability of the pelvis being exposed is also the strength, which is it's accessible. That the big muscles that we want to influence are really accessible. Very strong feedback in the knees.
It lets you let go of the abdominal muscles.
Yeah.
It's like movement being hip joints.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll just say here first that some of you felt this morning there's an incredible sense of comfort about the table holding your torso on the front without the stress of having your hips lengthened. Because actually you're in a seated position, but you're in a seated position with your stomach not working or your back not working. Yeah. And you'll experience that, some of you more and more as the week goes on, about the opportunities it offers for that, really letting go into the table in a way that some people just can't lying on their front. I can't because of, the nature of my spine. Whereas in this position, immediately it's comforting. Yeah. Now, what were you saying?
Getting movement of the hip joint.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yep. And you felt that this morning a little bit. And then when you come up in tall kneeling, you had it even more over a shorter lever. But yes. So, and this is what we'll explore in the FI. Sorry, Julie, I'm just going to touch you here, is depending on how you've got them configured on the table, and we'll go through a few different things, is that I've got all the access of moving proximally and moving the big part proximally and easily relative to the distal, which is a very revolutionary and lovely feeling. If people are feeling heavy here, that is nice. And then, of course, all this nice is accessible. But a downside is that you have the head, snout, breathing issue, but you can manage that with the rotation. And just like prone, lying on your front, you can relieve the pressure on the neck quite easily in this position. The other downside, of course, is that some of you experienced who doesn't like kneeling on their knees? Not for long. Yeah. So that's something that you have to take into account, is that people might not last 30 minutes on their knees, but they might surprise you. Maybe they do. Yeah, so that's some of the reasons, and you'll bubble up some more over the week as you keep working with each other about what this affords us in terms of access and comfort and so on, with the trade-offs around safety, because actually it is very safe position. Biomechanically, it's emotionally, neurologically, it's not necessarily as safe depending on people's experiences, and that's, you might not know that. In this very forum, a person that I started to demonstrate this FI sequence on was brave enough to share with the room that she has to fight her history of abuse when she goes into this position. You've got to be ready for that. And it's not, this is the fantastic atmosphere that we have in training programs, is that she felt very safe to disclose that history in front of everybody, I mean, she actually volunteered to be the demo person. And you have to be ready for those things as well. You don't know people's full history, and you don't know what a position will evoke. You can't know everything. So you have to always go, and it actually speaks to your point really a lot, Jane, is you have to go in being ready to adapt in the moment, because you don't know. We can have a prediction about people's possible reactions in positions, but you don't know until they tell you. Which is not to say that you'd be frightened of it. You know, I'm not frightened of this position because of that or whatever as a practitioner. It's just that, you know, I'm aware that there are a lot of different relationships to different kinds of positions. Any other positions you want to talk about? Standing? Julie, would you like to stand? Right there. And how do you feel about standing?
A little bit unsure about the balance.
Yep. So you're distinctly, distinctly unstable compared to the other positions, which gets to your point, is that there'll be many, many, many more habits present in this position. So I will have to work even harder. And so if you think about why do we lie people down in the first place, it's to quieten the nervous system down, reduce the battle against gravity so that their nervous system can quieten down enough for them to feel more subtle things. In this position, the nervous system is ramped up, got into overdrive. Stay up straight, all these things. Yeah, that's all those things. And it's a very action-oriented position because the base of support is even smaller and her centre of mass is even higher, so she's even more unstable. So the work is more, so the background noise is more, so she has a lot more things pulling at her attention. The upside? Closer to everyday life. And again, do we have to choose to do a lesson all in standing? Very rarely. I can't actually remember ever giving a whole lesson in standing. We do ATMs. Do you ever given a whole lesson in standing? No, me neither. But we use it a lot. Sorry? Great reference point. Great reference point. So it gets back to that point about you're not on position rations. You can have more than one without being greedy. All fours? Julie? What would this be good for? How do you feel in this position?
In this environment, okay. A single person, okay. But not for
vulnerable, yep. As vulnerable as over the table?
more vulnerable.
More vulnerable. Unstable?
A little, but I can manage this. I may not go. No, it's all right.
Yep. And what in you would start complaining first? What would you need a rest from?
My neck up or down, whatever's up would be my neck.
Yep.
My arms, I guess.
Yep. Yep. And wrists.
Yeah.
So some people really don't like the full 90-degree bend back with the fingers out. You know, you've done the ATMs, you can modify that, curl the fingers, reduce the angle in the wrist by putting something under the pad of the hand and having lots of rests. Or what Feldenkrais did with Bill on the elbows. Sorry?
Increase of sense of vulnerability.
Yeah, yeah. Do you want to go into that position, Julie, and just tell us how you feel? Yep. Elbows in, either underneath your shoulders, with the hands out parallel, like a sphinx. Yeah. So you've had a bit of a conversation about this position, I guess. Knees apart.
I think that's a lot of trust.
Yeah. Yep. So habitual holding of the head. Yep. To orient up. Yep. So to really let the head lengthen, but that might be nice. Maybe. Yep. Yep. Too intense on the hands with the head. Yep. I'm just repeating for the tape. Why did he choose this position with Bill? What's it good for then? I'm coming up with a lot of negatives. What did it allow him to do?
Access to the torso.
Yeah.
And the head.
And hips and feet.
Yeah. So great, he could work with the feet and the legs with a great deal of freedom for himself.
While keeping the knees in a position where they were pretty stable.
Keeping the knees in a position where they were pretty stable. So I'm just repeating for the box. Yeah.
Sort of fixed.
Sort of fixed, yeah.
Yeah, so that means that he could work with everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's get back to whoever's point was about moving the proximal relative to the distal. So because the butt is so high up in the air, the degrees of freedom in the hip joints are extraordinary, which again goes hand in hand with that vulnerability, but you get these extraordinary degrees of freedom. But it is quite non-habitual, isn't it? Yeah. For most of us. And of course, the fantastic access to the spine. But again, you've got this ability to move the proximal chest over the distal elbows. So you're really getting a lot of movement and work in the shoulders without people feeling like they're doing this. So it's very sneaky. And the belly can let go. How are you doing? Anything else that you noticed about that when you got in the position yourself? Scapula, very free to move. Yeah. So you can move the chest within the scapulae. You know, think of all those cat and camel ones where you're moving the chest within the scapulae all the time. It's fantastic. Fantastic for people to feel that movement and have those muscles lengthening and shortening in a completely different way. Yeah. It could do either, I guess. What was he doing with Bill, with the head? Was that?
No.
And it was on the table too.
Oh, he was working through the head.
Yeah.
Hanging.
Yeah. But he also had the head on the ground as well.
Head on the ground as well. Okay. On the top of the head.
Excellent access to the head. He was really
Excellent access to the head. Yep.
Oh.
And mobility in the top of the throat. So it's really hard to get. I often, feel getting movement here is so, clients crave it. It's can be such a dead zone.
Yep.
And having the weight of the head is, I always think it's like, like stirring into the corners. It's like getting the spoon stirring. It's just fantastic in there. But says she poking it. Yeah, so this is an interesting variation. I can't recall ever giving an FI in this position. Now there's a question. No.
It's the most
Thinking back through my history. Nope, never done Bill. Should I put him on my bucket list? No. But I'm not, I work with people who, have I worked with people on all fours? Yes. Probably they've gone down on their elbows a little bit, yes. Yeah. And certainly this is a great, we use these positions a lot in ATM. So they're not unfamiliar. Now look at all the things see how, Julie's, just really enjoying the degrees of freedom that she can access. So that's good. Any other positions? Yeah. How about this one? Yep. The sense of weight shifting in this position. Yes. Yes. It is. It's really, yeah. Yeah. I think that is the key, the absolute winner for these positions is how clear weight shift is. Yeah. Yeah. So, and because your base of support is so much closer, it's not your feet or your hands, it's your knees and your elbows. It's so much more immediate because it's just the next kinematic link. Yeah, so I agree. It's very clear, and it's really good for people who don't know that, and the people don't, or we're talking about this in the break, people who don't know that, they can really feel that movement in their hip joints in this position. Yeah. Yes.
Like just for example, someone who feels very vulnerable,
Yeah.
do you ever get down next to them and get like
You could. Yeah, it's a really good strategy. Yeah. Yeah, especially, yeah, and that's a really good thing is if you think people are feeling vulnerable in that position, don't go to that bit, don't immediately go and start fishing for their ischial tuberosities. You can stay up this end, like physically stay up this end and use your voice. So if you're worried about that, and that might be the way that you would desensitize somebody. And of course, always, and we'll do this when we start doing the demonstration for the over the table, explain what you're doing because I can't see you. And I don't mean in that, it drives me nuts in physio school now. It's like everything. I'm going to put my right index finger on your, fourth rib and then I'm going to apply 2 pounds of pressure, blah, blah, blah. It's just like gone over the top around consent for every little fucking thing. It drives me mental. But it is about, now is this like, I'm just going to find, this is the back of your pelvis here. Can you feel that? And can you feel the difference from this? And get them actively engaged in the feeling. So then they feel part of it. And then as well as instructing. And then when you're going to find the ischial tuberosity, so now maybe you would have got them to find it on themselves first in sitting. And now find that, and so they understand the importance of the ischial tuberosity and what attaches to it, or why it's good to know where it is because you sit on it, you're sitting. It means your pelvis is in a certain position. So I'm going to find that here. Is that okay? Or get them to find it and you put your hand over it or something like that. But we'll go through that. So there's ways around all of these decisions. You can make a decision that has a risk attached to it and then you de-risk it. Yeah. You had enough? Any other positions for Julie? Yeah. So if people are really low-toned, skeletally, they can collapse in that position and it's not enormously useful unless you get them. And that's where if we use that position, sorry? Not that comfortable, no. So you would be in that position for a short period of time and probably being very active because you don't need to feel a muscle lengthen because they're already too long. Yeah. Any other positions? Standing with the hands on the table? Yes, variation, yep. So now Julie already trusts you a little bit, so she will put her bum to the side. But that's an evolution. That's what your clients will get used to when they realise this is no big deal. So that's a variation, but particularly for people who can't take weight on their knees. Yep. And then there's all sorts of variations, that you do in advanced trainings around, leaning forward on a table like this so that you can still get some of that support of the front. Yeah, leaning over a bolster, blah, blah, blah. And then the variations, putting people on a dynamic surface, in lying, sitting, standing, etc. But that's kind of a way of thinking about, well, what is this position good for? What can I access? So particularly if your decision-making is around, well, I really, this person is extremely flexed, like they come in like this. So there's a constraint that they're not going to lie on their tummy well, but actually then lying on their back might be fine, but you'd have to prop them right up. Or maybe you start on their side because then you're not challenging, not a full frontal challenge to their flexion, for example, to see what sort of decision making. So working with their constraints, having a vague idea about where the lesson's going to go. And that's one set of frameworks for making a decision about a lesson. Is it predominantly, are we going to be exploring flexion? Are we going to be exploring rotation? Are we going to be exploring, what planes are we going to be exploring? That's one, not the only framework, but that's often a way that I think. You know, if there's a task that is predominantly about flexing, like let's say, you know, tennis, I mean, you know, there's rotation as well. But if it's predominantly flexion and extension, then maybe I want a lesson where I can access both flexion and extension. So I'd go sideline. That would be one of my decision-making processes. But what do I want to evoke in the lesson? Clear? All right, thank you, Julie. Very good. So think about your own experiences in different positions, and just remembering that don't project your love or dislike of positions onto your clients, because they're not the same as you. Or they are all the same as you, but they're not the same as you. Any other comments about positions or decision-making around positions? You're trying to not lie down, aren't you? Your decision-making, you really want to lie down. What do we need, a cup of tea? 3:30. Do we finish at 4:30? Quick break, and then we'll do the FI business. Quick break. Like when I say quick, I mean quick. Like, whew. Right, it's over.
Oh, I would love to be able to get up like that.